Coming up in the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, another big NSL weekend in the books as Thunder become the third team to book their place in the top four, and they do it in style. With just 3 rounds to go, the race for the final place is very much on, but the margin for error is minimal. And backed by popular demand, Chloe's Picky Bits. Hello, and a very warm welcome along. Yep, Picky Bits to come, lots more to get to before that. And Chloe, first of all, welcome along. Another big Super League weekend.
God, wasn't it? It was a real special one, I felt. The games, the caliber, Jeopardy as well, that was on Showcase. Yeah, I really enjoyed this weekend, Paul.
I think you used the word last week when we had Ella on as consequential, and it felt like there was a lot of consequential netball going on, which is really important, right? And whilst we can get into each game as we go, and as we always do, I wanted to start by very quickly getting a little bit of your thoughts on, that was our third double header as well, right? Dragons against Rhinos and Pulse against Thunder up in Liverpool, a brilliant venue where we were for the World Cup not so very long ago. It looked great, full production value, and I do think it merits the question as how these double headers maybe form a bigger part of our seasons going forward. It's a much bigger commercial question as well, but I think it's fair to say they've been a real success, haven't they?
Yeah, I absolutely love like the boom mics and everything that they chuck into it. And you can really sit down and enjoy the whole production of it and know that you're going to get 2 games of netball back to back. I think we've often said to each other, Paul, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast before, but 60 minutes is not a long time to watch sport compared to other American sports, but also like football is 90 minutes, rugby is 80 minutes. So you get your action, but it is quite short and intense. So I feel like there is the capacity to do a double and have someone sat the whole time enjoying it, having your breaks, having your analysis. I like the way they rotate the commentators as well from that commentary position to analysis, with Pam and Nia, I think, for the doubleheader. And they were both cracking games. So it was really nice to see, the way Nexus Dragons had their feel on it. And then, Thunder then come and take over for theirs. So they share that, I guess, arena hosting role. But yeah, no, I love them. I think they've got their place for sure, and I'm sure for clubs as well, if they can split the load of this requirement for this professionalization piece, I think it's a positive one.
Yeah, definitely something I'm going to kind of dig into a little bit as we get towards sort of the real end of the season, because I think it's fair to say we're seeing like certain teams being used at certain venues a lot in different places, and kind of how that might shake out in the fullness of time for something kind of maybe more tangible going forward. You and I have discussed the prospect of kind of like a double header almost being part of maybe every weekend, but obviously you don't want to take away that value of home support. And I think as we go through today's episode, we'll probably discuss the value of home support and home advantage. And obviously as we get to the semi-finals themselves, we'll see a little bit more how important that is. A bit of a whistle-stop SSN corner. Most notably, the bombshell, I'm going to say, that was dropped, that Helen Housby's actually dealing with a fractured back. I mean, it didn't seem to stop her hammering away on a drum, if I saw Instagram correctly. But as we get closer to England squad announcement, and it's our understanding that will take place probably around the 7th, 28th of this month. That's not the Commonwealth Games squad. That is the programme for sort of 26, 27. That is a real concern for England now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, someone said to me that she'd already shared this on Instagram around the time, but I think it went over my head at the time. I knew it was a back issue, but to hear it put out as a fractured back does, I think, ring really serious, doesn't it? And yeah, I'm not an expert in back issues, but that's a whole piece to recover from, particularly if it's down to a fracture. That's normally stress induced, I would imagine, and the Commonwealth Games is obviously a pinnacle, but the nature of it also, the back-to-back games, and she's such a key piece and has been such a key piece of what England looks like. Absolutely, for sure. It's a sharp reminder of the kind of injury woes that England is facing as it builds up, in the bookends, really. We spent a lot of time talking about the defence, but in the shooting end too, really, if you haven't got Helen Housby, she's kind of the the face of England netball, no?
Yeah, and I think in some ways the sort of face of netball for the Commonwealth Games, right? Like in a home games and in the United Kingdom. Look, I don't think it's going to impact her being in that sort of extended kind of long squad that is kind of announced for the sort of 12 months ahead. But I do think there's maybe a real worry now about how fit, first of all, she may be if indeed she makes it. So something we'll keep an eye on. Anything else to note from Chloe's SSN corner this week?
No, it's all ticking along. Elmarie Vandenberg picked up a back-to-back Player of the Match award, so she really is loving it. I keep mentioning her, but she is the one NSL player that went over and just seems to be absolutely thriving. The Thunderbirds beat the Fever at home by 20 goals, so that was quite special. Seeing Charlie Layton on the bench with Dan Ryan, who was not quietly, but quite obviously crashing out, was quite entertaining, I will say.
We might have to check in with Elmarie again, won't we? Because it's been quite the story for her over there. I don't know, in a funny way, I feel like we're sort of invested in this. We spoke to her; she was one of our first unlocked guests. We spoke to Norma Plummer as well about her. It does feel like, as you've said, she's kind of our Super League representative out there at the moment, and it might be nice to sort of see how she is and what she's up to.
It's almost like a message has gone, Paul.
Don't talk about the production. Don't talk about the production. That always stays in house. And on that basis, we'll tease this because every man, woman, and their dog seems to be talking England. As we've mentioned, we understand that squad is going to be announced at the back end of May. So Chloe and I next week, providing there is no real drama in the Super League, we'll take a little bit of time to kind of dive into what we can probably expect from that 26-27 squad and maybe the questions, the dilemmas facing Anna Stembridge and the rest of the sort of as they try and fine-tune plans, not only for the sort of games, but really for a cycle that's pretty massive. So that's a little teaser for next week. But I think we've waffled on enough really at the start here because there is a lot to get through in terms of some very, very meaty games and kind of the knock-on effect as far as the league table is concerned. But before we get stuck into it, Chloe, you kind of asked me this last week, but what the table might look like without bonus points. So I did it. Not a particularly difficult thing to do, just to take away the bonus points that have been accrued from defeats this year. I think the first thing to note is that Forest and Dragons, who are very much in that top four shake-up, they're the teams that have picked up the most, 4 from Forest and 3 from Dragons, a couple from Rhinos, Lightning, Thunder, and Mavs all picking up 1 bonus point in defeat, and Panthers and Pulse, the only 2 teams who are yet to pick up a bonus point in defeat. So what does that mean as far as a new table would look like? Well, the short answer is not a huge amount. But I think, Chloe, we've often discussed whether the bonus point is maybe making the league more competitive. But actually, if there were no bonus points, it would actually be more competitive, which kind of goes against what we're trying to do. And just to illustrate that, Forest would have 18 points rather than 22. Mavs would have 12 rather than 1. And Dragons would have 12 rather than 15, which basically means that rather than a 9-point gap between 4th and 6th, which is what we've got now, we would actually have a gap of 6 points, which is only two wins. So I suppose in a funny way, whilst the bonus point does make things more competitive, it actually wouldn't if we did the maths behind it.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think when we're watching a game, you want the last quarter, you want that chase down because you feel like the bonus point is on the line and that the losing team should be pushing for it. And we have seen so many quarter 4 fight backs for it. But yeah, without the bigger picture, as you've just quite beautifully put it there, the idea that Forest and Mavs will actually be much closer together is quite funny, isn't it? Because I do think that would have made Mavericks' day a little bit. I do think, Paul, though, it's easy to think with that game at the weekend between Forest and Mavs, it looks pretty set. But I think you always have to remember the slate that Forest have still to
Absolutely.
come. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, it is a curious thing. But I do think I think as a spectator, when you're watching the games, that at stake does help, especially with the super shot. I think because SSN, they don't have the bonus point system anymore. And there's something about a game blowing out, whereas here, like, there's obviously still something tangible to go for. I think it does help.
Yeah, and look, there's the other side of the coin as well, right? Forest have been in 4 really close games, pinched a
Mm.
bonus point in all of them. And in all honesty, it looks like it is probably going to be those bonus points that might get them over the line at the expense of Dragons and Mavericks. We'll see how things play out in the fullness of time. But I think that has to be kind of seen maybe as a little bit of a positive as well, that being able to stay in games and chase bonus points or be close. There'll be times where you might you might feel like you've thrown a game away, and I've no doubt Forest would probably feel that on some of those occasions. But yeah, look, we like to dig in just a little bit more than the obvious, and I thought it was a pretty curious thing. Also, if you took away the losing bonus points for Thunder and Lightning, there'd only be 3 points between first and third rather than 4. So again, slightly more competitive. But I thought it was interesting anyway. And I
It
like the
is
league
interesting.
table.
You do very much.
Okay, so without further ado, shall we jump into it?
Yeah.
The first, the biggest game of the weekend, of course, was third place Manchester Thunder against London Pulse. We've mentioned it was up at the M&S Bank Arena in Liverpool. It was a Thunder victory and a comprehensive one as well, 64-52. Nicola Smith, I think deservedly coming away with the player of the match honours for Thunder. She was someone we said when we were identifying our kind of halfway team of the season, we thought she would come on strong, and she's certainly done that. And that was very much the case for Thunder, who started fast and weathered maybe a couple of mini storms, but in the end closed out a pretty big win. And I think there's quite a lot to get stuck into. So I suppose the most notable thing was that there was no Alicia Sculls for London Pulse, and that made a big difference. That is not to detract from what Thunder were able to put out on court.
No, it wasn't, but I do think you're right that it definitely changed the shape a little bit of Pulse's attack, but maybe not the attack. It's the connection between midcourt to attacking third. I felt that was where she was most obviously missed. But the way that Pulse want to play was hindered a little, or the way they usually play was a little bit hindered by her absence. But it was in both ends of the court really that that Pulse were beaten, I think. I think the other thing probably worth talking about in this game before we get into it is the penalty count. Was it 67-37, the difference? It is, yeah. And that's an enormous gap. And actually, I did kind of go and have a look at what the two teams are averaging this season. Pulse are averaging 51 penalties a game, which is actually their average from last season as well, funnily. But 14 games compared to 11, and Thunder are less than that. But this was obviously Thunder much under that number and Pulse over that number. But it impacted the game, and I think, as I'll explain, some of the tactics that Thunder put out against Pulse affected their ability to adapt to, I think, what Thunder were throwing at them a little bit. But yes, Paul, before I go into it, I'd love to know what you thought of it.
One thing before getting to the nuances of the game, I do have a question for you. At the start of the season, did you have Thunder down as contenders for the title?
Yes.
Before the game, did you have Thunder down as contenders for the title?
For the title, yes.
And after the game, I'm presuming you still have Thunder down as contenders for the title.
Very much.
I was blown away by the narrative that seemed to appear that Thunder are underdogs, this like incredible squad that has been getting better and better and better and better all season, as you and I have discussed, were kind of played down. I'm not sure I've seen anyone play Thunder down this season. And I think their performance in the end kind of backed it up. And maybe there's an element of, we're third in the table, we're going to show you guys who are top, and it might be the same when they play with Lightning. But it just seemed really strange to me that some people were talking Thunder up as underdogs in that, because I don't think I saw anyone talking Thunder up as underdogs.
Yeah, I think the word underdog is too strong,
yeah.
Probably. I don't think they were favourites for that game coming into it, given that Pulse had beaten Lightning the week before and Lightning had not lost to anybody. And obviously Pulse are the reigning champions and so on. And they'd had already beaten Thunder. But yeah, I think the term underdog is a little strong. I do also think generally around netball that certain narratives because there isn't a consistent media piece on the game all the way through, stick more than others. So you can forget, if you are not paying attention, that Thunder are incredibly good and are building in a very precise way. I think that's what we really got into with Ella last week. And I think, I don't want to toot our own horn because I think we saw the product of that, but definitely it's a story over time, isn't it? That they've been building. And I think maybe because they didn't come out of the blocks explosively, maybe everybody sort of just slightly put them behind. And also because Lightning have been up until,
been great. Yeah.
Been perfect. Pulse have been they've been riding some waves, but coming out on top. So I just think it's an interesting overall narrative. I actually think in netball we have terrible memories. And you can talk about that at a league level and at an international level. People forget very, very quickly. And I do think that is because there is a bit of a media hole around the sport. So yeah, but it's interesting because the word underdog was the word that Nia Jones reached for, and Karen Gregg almost kind of laughed as she said, "Yeah, I'll take that if that's what you're telling me. I'll take it," because I think Thunder are, I don't want to, a bit of a chippy team, right? They like the fact that people don't always back what they're doing, or they don't believe in what they're doing, whatever. They'll take it. So probably just a nice little dose of that right before the game, before they went and put out that performance, probably did give Karen Gregg a little smile.
Yeah, I think you're right. I make no bones about it. I feel like if you want to grow a sport, you need to be able to tell the stories of the season. And I think anyone who's tracking the season closely, and there are lots of us out there who do, would absolutely have kind of Thunder down as a team that have been growing. It was just that defeat was kind of plopped in the middle of like a really good run of wins, right? Like that's just how it played out. But look, how did they go about it, Chloe? I think for me, they were really strong defensively. I think they took advantage of perhaps Pulse trying to find what they wanted to do in attack. And then I think at the other end, we spoke with Ella obviously about how Thunder might line up. And as great as Elle Cardwell was at times, she held so strongly. I think Lois Pearson and Nat Metcalf were absolutely crucial to the way the game played out, and whether maybe Thunder took a little bit out of what Lightning did quite well in the first half against Pulse, and kind of maybe made a bit more space behind the shooter, but on the court, if that makes sense. So it felt like Elle was maybe pushed up to the post a little bit more, and there was a bit more room for Nat Metcalf and Lois Pearson to play. You'll probably do this far more eloquently than me. That's why I hand the picky bits to you. But I have to say, I thought, just as an all-round offering, it was just a really good, really clinical team performance.
100%. I actually think everybody for Thunder stood up in this game. And we did say that in the preview that they would need to. I sort of raised the question of Amy Carter needing a big game. I thought she delivered that. I thought Taylor McKevitt as well. It was her typically outstanding self. And even in the face of a change, she had a potential. She was ready for less goals, and obviously that wasn't what happened. But actually, I'll show this a little bit. I think what Thunder did wouldn't have changed at all. Skulls will know it was designed for Skulls, but it fitted anyway because Skulls is part of a system that Pulse want to play, and she just executes it incredibly well. Shall we get into it? Okay. So, as we were saying, it was a complete team performance by Thunder, and there are two sort of aspects I want to look at: the defense and the attack. Defense, we pointed to Nicola Smith having player of the match in this, and she was pretty outrageous. And I do think actually when we talk about Nicola Smith hitting her straps, it's funny because she came to Thunder last year, but we got to remember, talking of bad memories around netball, but last year she was out for most of the season, and then coming into this season, obviously didn't have that time as an international, very long before the season starts. And then she has a shoulder injury. So we really are starting to see, I think, the best of her in that. So definitely something to bear in mind as we go into that. And I'll pick her up especially. But so much of what Thunder do really well of is the centre pass defence. And so much of this, what I'm about to show you, is set up from centre pass defence. But early doors, it's that pressure that they're able to build to then set up a Nick Smith pick-off or a Nick Smith deflection or a Huckle deflection or a Huckle intercept. But here, let me play this for you. God, I'm really leveling up my presentations, I will say. Go me. Okay.
Speaking of tooting your own horns.
Yeah, there will be some of that this episode. Warning. But yeah, Gracie Smith, centre pass defence. I just want to draw on this because it is this gap that they were able to build by pushing players out to kind of create this hole in the middle of the court. So as you can see, the balls had to go backwards. But if you look where all the Thunder players are, right, there's this big hole in the middle, and this is called kind of like a box, but I would think of it more as a diamond than a box. And then obviously didn't help that Taylor McKevitt fell over, but a bad pass to Tyler Orr that Huckle's able to pick off. Nice. That's a nice little turnover there. So let me just play it all the way back because I don't think I 100% explained that totally well. But just to show it again, you got this. And I believe that Sophie Kelly had 22 centre pass received. So a lot of the ball went to her, probably because Scholes wasn't there. But if you check where she goes, she can't release it straight away because of this work that McKevitt's doing on Orr to keep her out. So, and Gracie hasn't driven too straight yet off her centre pass. So she is already looking to her left to give it off to Fadoji, who's running to the line. And then look, that whole middle gap is empty. McKevitt's going to slip, but Cuckle's ready to pick that off. And so that's that kind of diamond structure working. So we're going to see it again here in this next clip. So again, Sophie Kelly receiving the ball. And then this effort, right, by Sophie Fawns and I think Lois Pearson or maybe Net Metcalf still at this point, and Amy Carter to hold everybody up. Just delay it so it has to go lateral. And then again, see McKevitt is ushering, shepherding, whatever verb you would like to use, Maseko out, right? Big hole in the middle, big. And this, you could see this quite a lot in the game. And Sophie Fawns is able to just stick an arm in, right? Just be a nuisance. So that's what that, by, making this big gap in the middle, what you're able to do. And it's what, it's sort of like a box that we see Pulse use so often, but in the centre, a nice sort of hole to work with. Here is a trap, and it's set up twice, and it's on the centre pass defence. And if you look at this, so Sophie Kelly received a centre pass, but the Thunder defence have barely stepped over the line, and this is because they don't want to. So they're going to hop over the line, and you'll see Taylor McKevitt is on Maseko. Nicola Smith is going to use a long, was it 2 centimetre long wingspan over Sophie Kelly. And Amy Carter is going to push Gracie Smith out to the wing. So it's a really, it's just another lateral offload. So the depth is totally denied. And McKevitt's now going to mark Maseko, the ball carrier. Smith is going to hold out Sophie Kelly, push her out wide. Carter's pushing Gracie Smith out wide. Right, see this diamond structure? 1, 2, 3, 4. Maseko looks to try and give it to Gracie Smith, sees that Amy Carter's covered that. The diamond stays in shape. And where's Maseko going to send it? Well, she's not even turned behind her at this point, and we're probably on the second. So she's going to go one place, bang. And see that? Huckle and Smith were both ready for it. And this is what I mean by this was a trap that was set up with the Scholes in mind, right? The turn, land, and send it in is something that Scholes often so does with Liv Cheen. And here, Thunder are inviting it, knowing that it's going to happen. And you could see the diamond, the way you come out. And it means that the goal defence can cut in on quite a good line. So, and then, Nick Smith gets the pickup. And here it is again, and Maseko again will fall for this trap. So Gracie Smith into the circle, sends it back to Fadoji. So that enables the Thunder players to set up. Perfect, because they didn't jump over the line if you saw. And if you see, it goes to Fadoji for the reset. Right, Maseko here. So you can't see Nicola Smith is not in your frame. She's just out of here. Amy Carter has got Gracie Smith out and in front of her. Josie Huckle can see Sophie Kelly coming for a drive. Right. Not a great feed, I would say, from Aseko, 2 hands over her head, and Nicola Smith is already there. Pop, pick it up. Here it is again. So that's that kind of centre pass team defence that's for Pulse to walk into.
7 interceptions, by the way. 7 interceptions for Nick Smith.
From Nicola Smith?
Yeah.
Yeah. Beast. Absolute beast in this game for sure. But one of the things I want to talk about here is the 3 foot mark. Now, I've been, I don't, again, I can't remember if this has been in my head or if I've said it on the podcast, but the 3 foot mark is such a big, at this level of the game, when you have the players with the height that they have, is essential to putting pressure on the ball. Until you play a game of netball, it's a really understated thing. It doesn't look like it has much impact when you're watching it sometimes, but when you're the ball carrier trying to look and see, and you've got someone with their arms up over the ball, it really is tough. We know that Fudoshi, for example, is a great example of somebody that can actually deflect from the 3 foot if it's done well, if you release the ball at the wrong point. It's on the shot. And we can see, if you watch SSN, you'll see that players reject, like Shamira Sterling Humphrey can reject shots. We don't see a tremendous amount of that in NSL. I don't think our players are quite there yet, but also the umpiring, I think, isn't quite there yet too. For anybody that's got young players or has long arms, the way you set up the 3 foot mark is also really important. I can only liken it to a pencil. And Nick Smith had so much fun with this during this game. But look at the way she gets up over Liv Cheen's shot. So it's interesting. This is clever because you can lean further with one arm, but then she's going to add up a second. So the one arm means that she can lean further forward to just put that initial pressure on. And then Cheen obviously is going to slightly move herself to be able to catch the post again, which is when she's then going to put up her second. And look how long and straight she is. And then it's a rebound.
That's pretty formidable, isn't it, to try and go over that?
Yeah, exactly. It is. And I think when we're asking ourselves about super shot defense, that long, thin pencil, pencil arrow, whatever you want to call it, pressure is enormous. And I've got another example of it here. Again, this time I think it's on Sophie Kelly. She's going to set herself up for it, and this is in the super shot period, just perfect, just as I'm talking about it. Look how long that is that Sophie Kelly has to look over, and she's going to put that arm down, and then it's another rebound that she's able to gather. But it's not just Smith in this game that was doing this to great effect. Huckle was doing it as well, and had some immense success with it too. So here we're like, this is great pressure by the two of them. They were really on it with their switches in this game. But Liv Cheen, right, takes the ball, super shot period again. Look at Josie Huckle. She goes straight up into that long pencil shape. And then here she actually it gets a 3-second call. Liv Cheen, Gary Burgess, you can see the celebration, calls 3 seconds on it. And finally, one more that I thought was really, really nice between the pair of them was Liv Cheen lands Josie Huckle up straight, just as the same as Smith's spin. And then to the point where Cheen doesn't want to shoot it. So she looks off and look who's ball side, ready for that with her own long arms. Smith yoinks that in, and it's a turnover. Bang. The other thing about Nicola Smith that we should say is she's a goalkeeper for South Africa. The goal defence game is really something that she's developed. We saw her when she was at Lightning in goalkeeper and goal defence, but this is an element to her game, and I think it's an incredibly wise decision for her to develop this even with her height. It makes her, because I think one of the great things about Courtney Bruce, right, she's one of the world's best goalkeepers, but we see her out at goal defence, and having that height running around is a nightmare. And I just, this bit really was big for me because it's an example of when you build that athleticism up as someone that is 6'3", I think Smith is, and she's able to then do things like this, which is beat Sophie Kelly on the centre pass. Like, that's enormous. right? She's got the range for it, but the speed as well to do that. So that's a nice intercept that she gets, and Thunder get a turnover off that. So shout out to Smith for that one. And then for the Taylor McKevitt fans among us, I just popped this one in. This is just for like, if we're on the picky bits plate, it's like someone's put cheese on the board, right? This is what this is. I thought this was cool. It's a combined effort really by Carter and McKevitt. But you know how I said in the preview that Gracie Smith could be beaten. This is a way that I think McKevitt did this a couple of times, but really got on to the back of Gracie Smith, and not in a dangerous way, but this was really cool. Maseko looking to pass the ball, and Gracie Smith ends up in the sandwich, and McKevitt gets the ball up over the top.
You very quickly just talking about the sandwich there. I think it was the opening game in the season where we spoke about what Pulse did so well, and there was a lot of sandwiching of Lightning throughout, and feels to me that that's pretty key, because you're sandwiching space, you're sandwiching the chance to be able to open a game up or whatever way it might be, and you're obviously looking to limit that space, and obviously a sandwich is a fairly obvious way to kind of do that, right? Like you're either blocking off the space or you're blocking off the pass or the player. So yeah, that's really cool.
And you have to be really precise giving that ball. So in Maseko's case, like any slight of error where you like overthrow it, then, which I think she did in that, under that pressure, and it just also shows you that Thunder are aware of where it's not, there's no fake or anything. Like you can for sure know, okay, Maseko looks like she's going to pass in that direction, which is what Carter and McKevitt both jumped on it. Now, this is really cool. And one of the things that struck me, also I mentioned this to Paul, we spoke about with Ella last week about how we wanted this game to be super, super dramatic. We wanted everything. And there was a comment on our Spotify from somebody saying that they were like, oh, well, I hope so too. I find the way Thunder play a bit dull. This to me is, I saw this as a bit of a challenge because, and I can't, opinion is an opinion and style is style, and everybody has their way of playing netball, and we can all agree there are better games than others, and sometimes an exciting game is not the best quality game, and so on and so on. But this to me was really cool tactically, and I'm going to try and persuade folks, if they don't find Thunder exciting, that they should get excited about this. So the box, right? We've spoken about this. I've spoken about it on Picky Bits before, and I've spoken about how Lightning used it against Pulse when they won over Pulse in the first half of the season. But it's really effective. Now, how can you beat the box? We've hinted at it a little bit, but Paul, what is the box defending? What is it setting? What is it in front of? What is it trying to get to?
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay.
You tell me.
Well, the D, right?
The D, right, yeah.
The D. And it's set up because you want over loopy balls, and that's what they're all there to pick off. And they are trying to get ball side all the time with that shape. That actually had a bunch of 3 key ways to how they broke the box. I've just picked out one, but there are 3. The first, you pointed to Lois Pearson having a big game. I thought she was enormous in the first quarter, particularly. She absorbed so much of the initial pressure of the game, and actually, I think she outscored Elle Cardwell, which I think is quite noticeable. Because then Cardwell, when you leave this game, you think, "Gosh, what an enormous game Cardwell had," but she really got to grow into it because Pearson took on that initial load. And one of the things that she did to break the box is the shuffle shot. And it was, she shuffled herself in. So it meant that there was no long feed into her or anyone. She got to the circle edge and shuffled in. That was one. The corner also was of the circle played themselves to a couple of times. But here is the one I wanted to point to. It's the number of feeds, the successful feeds particularly, that were made from the top of the circle, on the circle edge. I counted, when I watched this game back, 22-ish feeds that went in from the top of the circle that then basically went onto a goal. And that was, I would venture, maybe a third or a quarter of the total feeds that went into the circle. And also that... it was interesting to me, You know, when Karen Gregg called that timeout in the third quarter because there was a mini storm, as you called it. Before that, there had been no feeds from the top of the circle, and then after that, there were 8. And Sophie Fawns came onto the court, and I think Sophie Fawns came onto the court with that information from training, like at the top of her head. This is how we're going to do it. And the top of the circle, anybody that's told to feed the circle, you should have one at the top and one at the side, so you can do triangles. It sounds so obvious, but it's the discipline to be able to do that, to work your way to the circle edge and to make an effort to get there, and then also to execute while you're at the front of the circle with the feed over. So let me explain with some visuals what I'm talking about. Okay, this is 1-0, right? First quarter. So it's the execution of this. So it's a Thunder center pass, and there's a lot of phases that kind of happen here. But look, Metcalf, the pressure that Gracie Smith is putting on, enormous. We're talking about the pencil shape. There you go. Look at that. Perfect. Great form. Lois Pearson receives the ball here, and she sends it out to the wing. And then look where Amy Carter is asking for it, at the top of the D. And you can see the box, right? But the box has been kind of beaten there because just use the triangle. Gracie Smith is on the wrong side of Amy Carter there. So that's where that hasn't really worked. And then it's a feed into Elle Cardwell. In it goes. But just think, I put that on there because it's like, right, that's what that deliberate top of the circle attempt looks like. Obviously, as the game goes on, it gets harder and the discipline to enact it isn't so much there. But I'm going to try and explain in this one here with this clip. Watch the box as well as Thunder. It's 2 things to watch at the same time, right? But Elle Cardwell coming out to release here, because you can see already the shape is starting to form, the box shape. She comes out, and look, she's in the middle of the box, and the box can't be effective if someone's in the middle of it.
Which,
but she's
on your point on the last one, Lois was in the middle of the box, which opened it up. Yeah,
exactly. Right, but she can't see, and well, she dishes it off, but she ought to be in the circle, so she's got to dish it off because she's the shooter. But then, so Carter sort of fakes, but you can see the box shape is back again, so she's going to reset. Metcalf picks it off and see, look, you can see Zara Everett say, like, this is the classic. She's watching to see the box. And Cardwell, look, she's already on the move to come in, and it breaks the structure. But Nat Metcalf hasn't got time, so she's going to send it back to McKevitt to go again. Cardwell, reset, gets it in the middle, dishes it quickly to Amy Carter. Lovely ball. And then Carter looks, can't feed it, can't go, drops into Elle Cardwell. And you just saw the way that Cardwell coming through the middle pulls the box up, and then Carter, really nice little inside drive to protect the middle, ball feed. And Cardwell sinks that one. So that was a good one. Here's another one. Metcalf to Cardwell, back to Metcalf to Cardwell, who's now on the circle edge in the corner. This is really nice piece of netball. Cardwell, huge bounce pass to Amy Carter from one corner to another, a swing. And then look where Sophie Fawns is going to get the ball. Plop here, middle, into Cardwell, turn around and shoot. Don't think that one goes in. No, that's a shame because that was a super shot. But do you see how the triangle cuts through the box? And that top of the D, the ball speed there was so quick that they could get away with it with that bounce pass. And then Sophie Fawns, the release is so fast. And that was what her injection was, killer, I thought, because it was an SSN level player coming on just to inject that pace and power. Here it is once more. See, Zara Everett isn't quite in position, isn't quite in shape, and Cardwell gets the ball at the top of the circle. And then Fumi goes up, and the ball goes to the corner to Sophie Fawns. In, and she's going to just shoot that. And one more, just to drive this point home. We're joining Lois Pearson, who gives the ball to Smith to Carter, and the box there is forming 1, 2, 3, 4. Cardwell drives through it, doesn't get it, that's fine. She'll go back because she's pulled Hallie Adio out of the structure. Hallie Adio has to get back in. And then Sophie Fawns is trying to get involved into the middle, but can't because it's congested now, having Cardwell gone in and out. So that's fine. She comes out. She's a little bit in Pearson's space. That's okay because Pearson is then going to send it to Carter into the corner. Back to Lois Pearson at the top of the circle, who created that space for herself off the back of Zara Everett, and then a beautiful feed over the top in. And that's how that's done. The reason I bring this up also is because, and I think I alluded to it earlier, Poles play the box. It's their way of playing. But the problem with the penalty count is then if you are perhaps Sam Bird and Fiona Myrtle and you're looking at the way the box is being broken, you can't, with the penalty count, necessarily say to your guys, go man on man, because they're getting pinged by the umpire. So then the question is, okay, what other defense strategy have you got in your back pocket to pull out at this point? And I don't think Poles had an answer. And I raise a question of tactics also because in that first half against Lightning, which obviously Poles went on to win, but one of the key things that was obvious in that game was that they didn't know how to mark Berry Neal because they were so ready for Sammy Wallace-Joseph that when it was Ella Clark, they were like, okay, we'll just double on Ella. And that leaving Berry, where Fadoji wasn't sure where to put herself, she kind of almost like she couldn't necessarily adapt to what was being played. And I just wonder tactically if Burgess and Greg are asking some questions of Sam Bird to be like, okay, well, we know you guys can do this. We're going to do that. So how can your defense evolve, right? And that's something that champions have to do. They have to evolve. And I wonder here if there's just something. This is how the box could be broken. Pulse. What have you got? And if you can't go man on man because you're getting pinged, okay, what else? What next step do you go to? And I think there's also. I wanted to labour this a little bit because this is without Liz Scholes is not involved in this. So this is Scholes we saw how Thunder were prepared for that Scholes' style, but here this is a defence question and how that structure gets broken.
Very good.
Very good. Yeah. So it was a good game, I think, and hopefully I can persuade some people that it's not as dull as it looks.
No, and I think what was pretty clear, like it was a good start, right? The game went back and forth, and it looked like it. In my kind of view of it early on, it was a bit of an arm wrestle to see what kind of tactic was going to come out on top. And I think Pulse were 5-3 up or something, or I can't quite remember how the scoring went, but they kind of. Pulse were 5-2 down and 6-5 up. Sorry, just looking at my notes. And it looked like for a period that Pulse might be getting the upper hand, but then you've illustrated there what Thunder were able to do, and I think stick to. And I think that's the key aspect of being able to stick to something. And I also think as well, as we kind of get to this stage of the season, we said maybe will we see something that we maybe haven't seen a lot of from Thunder? Will we see something in response to that now from Pulse? I think from Lightning, we kind of saw them play with Berry Neal over Sammy Wallace-Joseph. And as we keep saying, the good thing about this is we're likely to see these kind of matchups again. And it's okay, well, what's the evolution from here?
I think evolution is so the word. And one thing I think that's a little ominous, perhaps now looking at Thunder, given that they still have Lightning to play in their regular season matchup, is we didn't see the Fawns Pearson goal shooter goal attack combination. So that managed to stay dry in terms of powder, right? That combination remains unplayed. And I think that Greg will see that as a bit of a win because it means that, well, she has intel on the fact that proved quite useful against Lightning's defense when they met up the first time, and then didn't need to play it in this one. So it's just less video, less for Lightning to get a look in. And we know that Loughborough Lightning, their analysis is like next level. I suppose for Pulse, now that again Sam Bird has had to shuffle a little bit because Scholes has been playing. Even in the big wins, she was on court pretty much the whole time.
First game she's missed this season. Yeah.
Right, so I'm wondering if can we give Tyler Orr more minutes at wing attack in case something like this happens again, right? Is that an issue, like something that, we versatility, as we said last week, is really great, but you have to practice it. I wonder if that's something Pulse might look at, because I thought Orr was not as effective as she should have been on paper in this game. And actually, one of the things I said when I did picky bits for this the first time they met, I picked out Zara Everett. Nat Metcalf has not beaten Zara Everett in a matchup, I would say, till this game, and I think the tactics helped Metcalf do that, but she executed them really well. So it was a quiet game from Zara Everett, really. So there was and I think maybe shooting perhaps wasn't as Liv Cheen came off like that. That was quite big, and she came back and she was better.
Quite brave as well, wasn't it? I think, because we've often
Yeah.
said, for all of the teams really, being brave enough to make those decisions when you need to. And for a period, actually, just to pick up off that, it did look like Pulse had kind of maybe solved a little bit of a riddle in the third quarter, but then Super Shot pulled away. But then again in the fourth quarter, which Pulse were winning 10-6, which had brought the gap down to 7. There were 2 shots from Liv pretty much under the post, and it was on the Thunder centre pass. And you just wonder if that might have been the moment. And obviously there's a bundle of pressure, and there was a whole lot of really good work done by Thunder throughout the game. But, with the advent of the Super Shot, getting a gap down to 6 and then it being your centre pass next, like that game could have got fiddly. It could have got fiddly
Yep.
if one of those 2 shots had gone in. And I think that might be the tinge of regret. I think, Sam was pretty honest afterwards, and even on social media, she posted that it really wasn't their day today, and they'll go away and work hard. And I think even if they had managed to sort of rally or finish strongly, they will be looking at the analysis and sort of seeing, okay, what do we need to improve on? Because they'll know that they will have to if these 2 teams meet again further down the line.
Yeah, and so timely. I thought of Ella to be like, Hallie Adio needs this is her opportunity, and I think that will definitely be a growth game for her, because the amount of energy that was spent looking at the umpires, you just can't be doing that. I don't think you can't be doing that in a game at that level, but if internationally as well. I spoke of Jess Shaw in that Lightning game being a bit of head loss. I think Adio maybe suffered a little bit of that, and it is going to be spicy. It is going to be hard, and you are going to get unpicked, and it is going to be difficult. So yeah, I can't wait for these guys
to go again.
Hopefully they do meet again. Yeah,
we've got one more regular season matchup. That'll be Thunder versus Lightning on the last day of the regular season, or last weekend of the regular
in the
season.
Velodrome.
Yeah, in the Velodrome, yeah, which I've said before, looks like a really cool venue to play netball in. And I do wonder, we might now be in a position where first place is up for grabs here. And I think we all know the value of what first place can be. So maybe you weigh up the value of first place against kind of showing your cards. And I think that's obviously the stage of the season that we're getting to now. So one more regular season matchup, but then obviously the drama of the playoffs to kind of keep us going. It is worth pointing out, because I didn't say it at the top, that win guarantees Thunder's top 4 place. We kind of knew it anyway, but it also moves them up to second place. They're 1 point ahead of Pulse, thanks to no bonus point for all the bonus point chat before. It means they're just 3 behind Lightning now as well, and they still have to play them. And the goal difference is also down to 12. So if both teams win their last couple of games and then go into that final game, a 6-goal win for Thunder could take them top of the pile. And if Pulse sneak on up the back and carry on winning all of their games, all of a sudden Lightning could find themselves down in 3rd place. So that is a real shuffle up at the top of the table. So we'll see how that plays out. But look, beyond the big game at the top of the table, there are a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to kind of go through what I thought was actually the most significant, and I think that was Forest winning 57-49 at the Motorpoint Arena against Mavericks. Forest were 4th, Mavericks were 5th. It meant no bonus point for Mavericks in that, which is absolutely massive, really, when you think about it now, because what that does for Forest, it means that they are now 9 clear of Mavericks. and there were only 3 games left to play. So 3 wins needed for Mavericks and 3 defeats for Forest, and that's not counting what Dragons might do. So there is no margin for error now as far as Mavericks are concerned. And yeah, it just seemed like a really nervy, edgy game. I think that was my overall takeaway. It seemed like Forest had control of it, but kind of couldn't push on or maybe respond to some of Mav's changes. I also thought it was notable that it was Forest's lowest scoring win of the season, and we know Forest are pretty good for goals. And it's their second lowest goal tally of the season. So Mavs will feel like they've done a lot of things maybe right, but really, I suppose the crucial aspect here, and I think we discussed this, is that the Mavs attack end didn't kind of do what it needed to do to stay in this game.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think it was Mavericks' attack that kind of let them down. It just looked really disconnected. The feeds. There are a couple that Liversidge sent in that looked like that classic wing attack thing of, I need you to get it there where you're not. Like, that's where you should be, is where I've sent my ball, rather than to where the shooter is. And that's normally a timing issue. And that will be frustrating because that's a connection that has been there for a while. But obviously the Emily Andrew at goal attack entity is still quite new because of the Emma Thacker injury. But we saw, Izzy Phillips coming off. I think, again, that was in response to trying to find some flow or some connection. Hannah Nightbridge comes on, but then she gets warned, so she has to come off. That the warnings that were being served out in that final quarter also were quite tense. But the flip side of it, and probably points to Forest's low score, was I thought Ellie Sadler and Jamie Golub were immense in this game. Mavericks centre pass defence was really effective in this game. It's just it's netball, right? If you can't score off your possession when you have it, you're just not going to get very far. And I thought it was really interesting because I thought when I watched this game back that fourth quarter was so nervy. Players really not moving, like that classic when a situation gets tight in netball, players stop moving. But the decision by Chelsea Pittman to take Dixon off, not at the 5-minute, which we had been seeing as a developing strategy, but at the 10-minute mark. So Anya Williams comes on with 10 minutes to play. And I think that really did have an effect on the flow of Forest, and a couple of big wins, a couple of key mistakes, actually. I think it was more Mavericks giving unforced error kind of put some wind in their sails, which they were then able to just, okay, we've got this now, we definitely got it, and then take the win. And I think it feels about right. I just, if Mavericks had more depth in this, I thought Sophie Barron's entry was really important, and I think maybe if it happened earlier, then the game might have gone in a slightly different direction. Maybe Forest wouldn't have had that, because you pointed to that they built out a bit of a lead. That might look different. You want to be able to start Inga because you've started her and she is your started goal shooter, but just doesn't feel that connection piece is there, and that was always a worry, I think, for Mavericks. And yeah, big game though, big result, and I think you could see in the Forests play in that final sort of timeout the way they really got in as a group and sort of said, like, not this year, this is not going to happen this time. So I do want to shout out a little bit more Ellie Sadler, because where are her stats? They were really impressive because I think Ella had said, come on, she's had Cardwell, she might as well have Rolene too. But this is her third Super League game, and she ended the session with 4 pickups, 10 penalties, 1 rebound, 6 deflections, and so for the sum of 5 games. Jamie Golub had 6 gains. But the unforced error count is interesting for Mavericks, because you can really see it in their attack. Emily Andrew 4. Yeah, Susie Liversidge 5, Gemma Donoghue 3. And actually, unforced errors, going back to our previous game, if you look at the unforced error count between Thunder and Pulse, that's also really, there's a huge gap between that as well. But yeah.
But what you were saying there, because I was going to actually point that out in the Thunder Pulse game, is actually you've you've caused the mistakes in that game. I feel like in this game, whilst Forest's defence, we know how strong they can be, I feel like Mavericks were kind of probably the architects of their own downfall with some of their unforced errors, as opposed to almost Thunder's game plan forcing the errors in the Thunder Pulse game. That's certainly how it felt to me watching the two games.
Yeah. And actually, I thought, I mean, Neve Cooper ended up on a warning and then went to the bench. But in terms of numbers, this was her biggest game, like 4 gains. And I think the fact that she has 4 gains and Susie Liversidge has 5 unforced errors, like kind of probably tells you a little bit about where Liversidge's headspace was at in that game.
The consequence of that game, obviously, was the first game of the doubleheader, because it opened the door, if you like, keeps the door open, should we say, for Dragons, who are now the major contenders for top 4. It looks like it will probably come down to Dragons and Forest, and that's because Dragons were 68-62 winners over Leeds Rhinos. Another really impressive showing from a Rhinos team who, we keep saying this, but give Lauren Palmer a full squad for a whole season, and I would be very, very interested to see what would happen to Rhinos. It obviously wasn't to be. They had the lead early in this game, but Dragons came back. And in the end, actually, as much as we say the positives about Rhinos, it was super shooting that very much kind of kept them in this. But Dragons now, that's a really good win for them. 68 goals is obviously a big total for them. It's back-to-back wins for the first time in a couple of seasons. And I think as far as Dragons are concerned now, they can really build off this. It's a real springboard for them to take a system that is working into their final couple of games, and what will be and how things shake out. But Dragons are in the mix, and I think they'll have settled for that. If you'd have told them that at the start of the season, with 3 games to go, you'll be in with a chance. It's going to take a few things, but you're in with a chance. They'd have taken it.
I want to go back to our preview episode because I think I did say that Dragons could be like 5th in a conversation for 4th. And I'm pleased they've got themselves there, because what I think that tells you, just as a bit of a macro thing, is stick with a squad with a good coach who has a way that she wants to play, recruit well, as in don't make wholesale changes, recruit where you need to, which in this case was have a super shot threat, and then you can really start pushing yourself around the mid table, which is what Dragons have done. One thing I think we said when we previewed this game was like, let's see it, Dragons, like let's see this back-to-back win. And then when I was watching it, I was like, oh no. Just the way that game was going, I think they tend to play to the level of their opposition, which I think about tracks, in their journey as a side. So from what I've just said, I think they're at that level now where they can compete, but it's that identity, their style, that I think they don't still, as a unit, have the discipline to like completely enforce all the way through. And Neve McCall is such a helpful thing to keep up with a team that super shoots. So, and I think last season they wouldn't have been in this game, but that would be my one thing for them, and my one question of them as they head into that top 4 battle is, because they're going to need to keep winning, is can they execute their way of playing over another team? Because it just feels like they're actually quite reactive to what's in front of them. But another enormous game for Bethan Dyke. Bethan Dyke is really tearing as a wing attack, and I think Chouane is a really great foil for her. I think South Africa, we say it so many times, South Africa are just benefiting off of this court time and this work that's gone into Chouane, because I think she does look really, really good. And Philippa Yarenton 100%, George Rowe another game 96%. Her percentage is unbelievable. And Neve McCall 8 super shots. It's going to do it.
Bethan Dyke and Casey Chouane, 65 feeds between the two of them.
Yeah.
Now, that obviously you would expect your centre and wing attack to dominate that statistic, but that is 65 feeds is a fairly phenomenal. 40 of them Bethan Dyke as well. Just 3 unforced errors, and I think when you're putting up that type of volume, like, you could probably forgive the occasional unforced error in there as well. It was Leah Middleton got player of the match honours as well, and I think once again, to your point, being knowing where to boost your squad. And I suppose in some ways you go back to Pulse, right? The last couple of years, they were very specific in how they recruited. Like, they had a core of a team that had been growing and going through things together, and they just picked the little places where they felt they needed to improve. And I think Dragons are a really good example of doing that. I'm glad you said it. And I think Rhinos will maybe look at Dragons themselves and think, do you know what? We've got the nuts and bolts here of a very good team. We maybe need an additional viable option in the circle. They are heavily reliant now on Paige Reed and Harriet Jones. We're not seeing Simone Gordon at all. So with that in mind, whether Joyce comes back or whether that is number one on their recruitment list, I think that really would open up Rhinos. I don't think they need a huge amount. I think we've seen growth from India Massa, we've seen growth from Bella Bayliss, and whilst they are without a win since the first round, it feels like there's a lot more positives to the way they're playing and the way they're growing.
I really like Bella Bayliss as a centre. I think she'll really come on. And coming out of Loughborough Lightning into that starting position for Rhinos is such a nice piece in her journey. I did think that the Marlena Langer Samari Visser combo was better than the Yomi Wilson Visser combo. And I think, Yomi Wilson is really young. I think she just needs, and I probably wasn't expecting this much court time, as I think we've said a couple of times, because Giles Brown was supposed to be there. But yeah, like, it is a question for Rhinos as to who they're able to keep. I hope they're able to keep some of it, as you said, the nuts and bolts. And and I join in the chorus of give Lauren Palmer a fit team. Because they are. But I guess I don't know their slate off the top of my head, but they're not going to. No team should come up against this side in the next 3 rounds with any idea of, it's just Rhinos. Like, that would be foolish.
Yeah, you're absolutely in for a game, and I think that much has been evident. 2 bonus point defeats before this, and just falling 1 goal short of another bonus point defeat here. I think they'll take enormous encouragement. And to your point about the boom mics as well, I thought being able to hear Lauren, who was like absolutely not the type of coach you would expect anything less from, but there was no quit in that team as they were coming down the stretch, even though they called the tactical timeout. They wanted to go again, and in the end, they didn't quite have enough to go again. And you wonder if that's just an element of experience. And obviously that Dragons team now feel tried and tested, and you want to be tried and tested coming down the stretch, because whether they like it or not now, they've got 3 games left. And if they do make the top 4, like, every single game for them now is must win. So I think you can't really ask for much more than that. It's not about bonus points for them. It's win or go home time, all 3 games. And then if you make it, you're going to have to win your kind of minor semi-final, major semi-final, before you get going. One more game from the weekend, and Lightning back to winning ways. It was the first game of the weekend. It was Lightning against Birmingham Panthers, and in the end, a comprehensive victory, but maybe a little bit closer than we all anticipated in the end. 76-60, the final score, a 22-16 final quarter, and a 23-11 third quarter eventually putting to bed the Panthers challenge, because Panthers were ahead in this after the first quarter and the second quarter. Sammy Wallace-Joseph was back. She started, and it was Ella Clark in the end who came away with player of the match honours. Chloe, where do you want to start?
Closer than we expected, didn't when we were previewing this game. But I think I did say I wanted more from Sammy Ngobani, and cue Sammy Ngobani. She turned up for this one. The connections were there, they're growing, and I think we got a sense of what that could look like again if it's allowed to breathe and stay. And I think that just really probably, I suppose, if there was a little bit of a, remembering, and we should probably go back to the Pulse Lightning Pulse Thunder game and remember that Pulse had played 70 minutes against Loughborough Lightning, because Loughborough Lightning looked like they had just also on a bit of a hangover of 70 minutes for that first half. And I thought it was interesting, the decision to start Barry Neal and Samantha Wallace-Joseph, and Barry Neal was nowhere near where the form that she was against Pulse, but also Wallace-Joseph was not on. It was like what I think Camilla Buchanan said it very well. It's like watching two different players, the way she was in the first half to the player that turned up in the second. But generally, just across the board,
Do you
very
think there was
lethargic.
I mean, I would never associate a Vic Burgess team with complacency, but they did look a bit complacent early on, didn't they?
I think it's fair. I don't know what they were expecting. The defence just were probably a bit bamboozled by the connection that that we saw between Creek and Ngabani. And also the balls that Ngabani was giving, like that looked to me like the Ngabani that wasn't on hand to beat England, that sort of vision, that maverick way of playing that she has and the splits that she's able to do. But it's just, yeah, I'm not surprised that this team couldn't go more than a half, or, because they did find it harder and harder. But, Fiddler is not an easy goalkeeper. Like, I think that's another thing that shouldn't be underestimated. Gabby Coffey played the best that she's played all season. I don't think this team is like down and out just because it's not winning. It just, obviously there was something about that front court I think it was a combination. I think the responsibility sits on Neil and Wallace to just like execute better, and probably a bit of a miss that combination couldn't have been practiced more. But then by the fourth quarter, obviously she comes back on to work more on that Clark Neil axis, which I think is really important, as we said, coming down the stretch and playing cards and powder drying or whatever similes and metaphors we want to use. But yeah, I just, and I do think there is a question in there for Lightning's defence end and what the status is of Beth Durant and Alice Harvey, because there are going to be some concerns for them, I think, if they do not have at least one of those players back come the business end.
We spoke about it after the Pulse game and not being able to have that sort of change-up option. They're obviously able to use Ella Clark in this game very, very effectively. And we saw Jo Noel again, and I wonder if more game time for her maybe means we're not going to see as much of Alice Harvey down the stretch. Even if both Alice Harvey and Beth Durant get themselves fit and available, and you would absolutely, they've secured their top four place. There should be no need to take any risks, right? Like, you want your best team fit, but you wonder as well how much maybe a lack of court time might start to play into things now as well. So we've got 3 games left, as we've said, whether the time might be right to see them if they're close. If they're not, then you do think, well, maybe we might need to see a little bit of mini Van Nierop just to get some more options available to the team, because the last thing you want to do is go into maybe 2 or 3 successive games, whether you lose in your sort of major semi-final and then you have to play a prelim final before the final, or however it might play out. Those games are going to be quite condensed in a short period of time, and you wonder how ready Alice and Beth will be, because that 10 is crucial to, I think, any success Lightning may want to have going forward, because we've spoken at length about change-up options and versatility and being able to offer something different. So I suppose for me, that's what I'll be looking very closely for over the sort of final 3 weeks in terms of the regular season, whether we're going to see Alice and Beth a bit more.
Yeah, and I think also I completely agree, and what that says for England. If Beth Durant is supposed to be in an England squad and she's on rest until finals, I think she's the caliber of player, and Lightning are a franchise as such that she can come in at the later stage. There are systems that she knows that they'll run, that she can slot into. She is a wing defence, so there are very specific job requirements in that position. Alice Harvey, I think, as a goalkeeper, I have more questions of, just as goalkeeper, goal defense is a combination job, and it's a partnership one. And I know she's got the partnership with Shadeen van der Merwe, but it's and Selena Appleby Prince, but it's that there's potential for more rust there. But if we see Beth come back for finals, let's say, or around that period, what does that say about her capacity to play week in, week out netball? And what could that say about her capacity to play day in, day out netball in a couple of months from now?
I'll tell you what, Chloe, save that thought and save it for the England episode coming up.
There's a teaser, everyone. The big thoughts that are to come.
So look, that's the weekend done and dusted. Round 11 in the books. We've kind of talked through the table a little bit there. I don't think we need to over egg the pudding here. It's very much a case of 3 teams chasing that 4th spot, but the margin for error for Mavericks is kind of non-existent now, really. 9 points. Forest could afford to lose all 3 games with one of them by a bonus point, and that would eliminate Mavericks from the equation. Dragons have to keep winning, and Forest have to keep losing for some drama. So let's get into round 12, and can we expect any drama in round 12? We shall see. We'll go through them in chronological order, as we always do. Starts on Friday night, and we have 2 games, both on at 7 o'clock, which is, first of all, unfair, but does mean you have a choice to make in terms of your first choice viewing, or you double screen it. Rhinos in 7th against Thunder in 2nd. That's at the Cannon Medical Arena in Sheffield and is on Sky. And on the BBC, it's Lightning in 1st against Forest in 4th. Obviously, Lightning won the first game between those two. And Thunder won the first game between Thunder and Rhinos. Let's start with Thunder and Rhinos, Chloe. And I think the best way maybe to look at this, as we always do, is kind of where do you think this game might be won and lost? Where are the matchups that we'll be looking forward to?
Rhinos are such a super shot dependent team. So I think it's going to be in that defense end. Like for Thunder's defense end versus Rhino's shooting end, that will be the crux of the game. But what I think Karen Gregg will do is try more combinations, get her McCormick's, Rayner out and about, running, trying, pushing, testing things out in this game, and against a healthy opposition, as we've been saying, but one they think they'll definitely want to get a nice dominant win over, I suppose. Yeah, I think
it's about pushing on from here, I think, now for Thunder, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we kind of take that kind of underdogs tag from earlier, pushing on now, and you've spoken about maybe what combination we might see at the attack end and kind of fine-tuning those little things, maybe without giving too much away, because they're a team who are purring.
Yeah, well, I just thinking ahead, looking at your lovely show notes, the next game that Thunder have after Rhinos is Forest. And Forest are another team with an immense super shooter. So if I'm Laura Malcolm and I'm working with my defence end, I'm saying to Huckle, Smith and McCormick, right, we are going to nail some of our super shot defence. We're going to be seeing more pencil work. Like, let's lock in on what we can then put out against Rolene next week. Those are the kind of things I think that will the thinking that will be happening over at Bellevue HQ will be, what can we start preparing for? What parallels can we start drawing? What systems can we start toying with ahead of the fixtures that we have? Because Forest is not going to be an easy game for them, and neither will Lightning after that. So it'll be about that kind of preparation, and it will be, when do we see the Pearson Fords combination? Cardwell, can she take a bit of a break? Does she want to take a bit of a break? I think the momentum's actually been really good for her.
Yeah,
You've
I agree.
said so well so many times that she's been getting better and better. She really is finding her
And
That's the
mojo.
word I want to use. Her mojo. Yeah, that's the word I want to use. Thank you. Yeah, in that. And, and you texted me, I hope you've told Ella that I am the right starting 7.
But we did also say that the tweaks might be important to that. And like you said, I do think, the injection of Pearson at wing attack was was really important, and it just swung the game back again. Not that it was spiraling away, but it just
No, it was really
took
Metcalf
control
was
back.
tired.
Yeah.
Pearson back on, nail in the coffin.
I think I suppose in some ways the bonus for Thunder here, if you like, is as well as Rhinos are pushing themselves, and I'm sure Lauren Palmer would love to get one over on her old team. They have games against Forest and Lightning, as you pointed out. They are all kind of like, for the teams they're playing, must win games, right? So they are going to get tested, which obviously you want, I think, coming down the stretch. And I wonder if there's an element of that that's kind of been in the rearview mirror for Karen and the team. It's like, okay, when we get down to the final games, we want to be good to go, not just for the playoffs, but for the 2 or 3 games before that, because they might all mean something to us. We've said about Rhinos, I think we've spoken about them enough. They finish at Lightning and then at home to Panthers. So I think for them, just continuing to kind of build some of those connections, and maybe in the case of sort of someone like Marlena Langer, the ability to kind of really put herself in the shop window when it comes to a Super League team next year, because she has absolutely done that.
Yeah, I thought Ella was really good on this last week, talking about that, because that's such a player's perspective. Yeah. Probably something you and I wouldn't necessarily think of, that she was like put up here. Like she was really good on vibe and culture, and she was really good on that. And Rhinos will be looking at that Panthers game. Like, as in, we want those 3 points. So, yeah, go harden yourselves against Thunder and Lightning, and come ready into that Panthers game, ready to get that next set of 3 points. Absolutely. So they're not done. I know that Ella said they'll be hoping the season ends because they'll be tired and obviously probably a bit frustrated with how their season kind of unfolded in circumstances outside of their control. But they are, I think you could see that they are incredibly driven by this desire for 3 points. So, yeah, I think that's
the other game on Friday night, as we
to.
mentioned, is Lightning Forest. Obviously, both teams with a fair amount on the line. Lightning won't want to slip up, because they do have now 2 teams very much on their tail, having dropped points to Pulse, and then Thunder having taken points off Pulse. It means that first place is very much up for grabs. Remaining fixtures: Lightning after this take on Rhinos at home, and then Thunder away. Forest, as we well know now, not only do they play Lightning this weekend at the David Wallace Arena, they have both Manchester Thunder and London Pulse. Both of those games are at home at the Motorpoint. I feel like there are a million games at the Motorpoint this season.
You read my mind. I was just thinking the same thing.
But look, it's a game that Forest will absolutely think they can take. They obviously took a victory off Lightning last year. They only lost by 1 in the first meeting back in round 7, which was at the Motorpoint Arena. Of course it was. So look, I think here Lightning will maybe look to build on how they finished. Forest, I don't know, maybe they'll feel there's a little bit of pressure off here, even though they have to win in a funny sort of way.
I don't know about that.
No,
my first thought, Paul. My first thought, Paul, is scorers. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready
for
this?
For all the tech officials.
We're not having that again. Yes, come on. This is such a great game. These two have, in their short history, developed such an amazing rivalry. Jada Pekova, I think, wakes up the day of that game like Samantha Wallace-Joseph. You're mine. Like Sammy Wallace-Joseph and Pekova in that, it's fireworks. She lives rent-free in Samantha Wallace-Joseph's head. And it'll be really interesting to see how Lightning go and work on that, because that has been the case since the two sides have matched up. So I think really important to kind of protect Sammy. Like what kind of feeds are going in? Can we neutralize Pekova's aerial game because it's so good? Can we figure out in a way that I think so many teams come and approach Fedoju with that mindset as well? Like, how can we deny her the kind of ball that she wants? That would definitely be something Lightning will want to work at for sure, because maybe these teams meet again, right, Paul?
Absolutely.
With the top 4. I think also, Paul, this is a really potentially massive game for Anya Williams. I know she started the last time these two played, but that was when Dixon was making her return. Rhea Dixon, this is her old side, so we know all the passion that comes with coming up against your old team. But I do think Dixon is another player that's very effective against Lightning that Forest have. But the way that Pittman has been playing Anya Williams to kind of come on and help release some of that super shock pressure on Rolene, like this is going to be massive for them in this. And I just think the middies, there's a great battles across there. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think for Forest, we've spoken a little bit about them at different times this season and maybe wanting to see a little bit more. I think for me, they are, you know, they've been pretty lucky with injuries all year, really,
Mm.
outside of Rhea Dixon, and that Pekova Pavlin axis has not been broken up almost at all, really, even to the point where we barely see sort of an Retief from the bench. It's been Neve Cooper and Hannah Layton over the last couple of weeks who've chopped and changed. Iona Christian has been a constant at centre. So I don't really feel like there are any excuses for Forest. And you're right, they match up really well for some reason against Lightning. These games always seem to be really, really high scoring. They have done over the last couple of years, which I think suits Forest to get involved in a shootout, because as good as their standalone defence is in Pekova and Pavlin, I'm not sure they can actually do a huge amount to sort of stop Lightning scoring. I know sort of Jada does do a great job on Sammy Wallace, but I just feel there are always goals. And I think if you were going to back a team who are going to score loads of goals, you'd always pick Lightning. But Forest seem to be a team who can keep pace, right? I think, outside of Pulse a little bit earlier this season, and that game went to extra time, it's quite hard to keep pace with a Forest team when they're purring. That's largely down to Rolene, right? So how do Selena Appleby Prince, and I think one of the stars of the season in Shadeen van der Merwe, how do they work out a way to stop Rolene? As much as I've just talked about what Forest have been able to do, what Lightning have been able to do well, Forest are able to do it just as well at the other end.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is because to your point about Forest letting goals in, but with Lightning, it's Ella Clark as well, right? She's a beast. So um, that's I think explains why you reach for the twos quite so easily, and there is something about. I think the 10-minute netball is really like that's where they win their ball
Yeah,
for us.
yeah.
But I think what's remarkable is about Rolene is we're still saying how do you stop Rolene, aren't we? But genuinely, like to the quality of her as a player, it was not like she had a great first season because nobody knew what she could do, and turns out she's really amazing at 2-point shot. She's gone and done that again this season for the most part. I think when I think of that the most recent Dragons game, I think there were a couple of big misses in that I wonder psychologically how they've sat with her, because I think there were some shots her and Williams could have gotten in that final quarter that might have swung that game in a slightly different direction. But she'll put her big girl pants on for this one, I'm sure, and she'll know that this is one where she has to be the best Raylene that she can be, and I have no reason to doubt that she'll get there, because for so far, based on the evidence, because she has been, she's back on the top of the boards, I guess, because Wallace Joseph missed a game, but no one's stopping her still, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's coming up against all sorts of defenses, right? Um,
Yeah.
on Saturday, and Panthers versus Dragons. That's in Coventry at the Sky Dome. The first game between the two this season at the House of Sport, I think, is one that's going to stick in Dragons' craw as the season pans out. There's obviously still every chance they can make the top four, but had they won that game and they lost it by one goal, they would be 5 points behind Forest and not 7. That feels significant because Dragons go away to Pulse and away to Mavericks in their last two games. And as we've mentioned, they pretty much need to win them all. Panthers, obviously, we sort of said last week they'll be looking for building blocks. And certainly quarter one and quarter two, so the first half, was really something they will take forward into this game. And they'll take a lot of belief from the fact that their only win this season did come against Dragons. So whilst on the face of it, you would think Dragons, with everything to play for, should be the team that win here, the reality is that there's a little bit more to this game.
Yeah, it's going to be beefy. I think this one, isn't it? But this was when Sophie Barron was in, and Sophie Barron's not there anymore. So that'll be really, yeah, just a really interesting one. This, where you're like, I'm not too sure what to say because it feels like it could go anywhere. And
Yeah, it does,
like
doesn't it?
as
Which
you
is
said it on the
bizarre,
face
really.
of it, Dragons should win this.
Yes.
They have to win this, and they probably will win this. But I think we're in for a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what I wanted to do, but I didn't quite have time because I was busy today at work. I wanted to spend my lunch hour, because that's what I do, going to look back at the first game and just sort of see maybe where Panthers did it. And I know they did it right at the end, right? They ran the clock down really well and then picked off the one rather than a desperate two. But actually, I wanted to look a little bit more and dig into why they were able to cause Dragons such a problem. Like, look, Dragons scored 67 last time out. They only scored 47 against Panthers. I do feel like they're maybe in a little bit of a better place as far as how that attack end works for them. And given how much Panthers chop and change, I do wonder if the consistency here gets Dragons over the line. And the fact they now have something that they can see, right? A top four place with flashing lights all around it, if they can do what they want to do and get a couple of favours along the way from elsewhere.
Yeah, we didn't really say this when we reviewed the Panthers game, but one of the things that wasn't just Lightning that changed in the second half, it was Panthers. There were some big changes
Yeah,
that I simply could not understand.
I totally
Like
agree with you. Yeah.
and actually nearly all of them were reversed later on in the third quarter. Apart from I think Ruth Hughes was the only one that stayed on, but all the Shelley McGee went back off because Gabby Coffey had come off, and they couldn't understand that because I thought Gabby Coffey was doing really well. So this is also, I think, I know there's method to madness sometimes, and we said there'll be building blocks and things I'll be working on but I have got like Sonia McClellan makes some good decisions. It feels like you want to say that. I mean, I don't know what they're building towards, but yeah, let some things ride out a bit, as well as making changes where you need to make changes. But some of them I just don't understand, and it would be nice to have some consistency
It felt like
for the players that are performing.
Yeah, Panthers has done a really good job in that game against Lightning. And Lightning are going to come back. Lightning even more are going to come back when Ella Clark enters the equation, which is what happened. But don't throw out all the good work that you've done over the first two quarters to immediately respond to what the other team are doing. Trust what you've been building and growing yourself over that sort of first half, because and I think Lucy and Camilla were really good in comms. Both were talking about how much positive there was for Panthers there. Take that forward. Like, look at what Rhinos are doing at the moment. There's a consistency. And whilst I don't doubt it's a really difficult thing to be leaving Simone Gordon on the bench, there's a reason for it, right? Because there's growth elsewhere without turning this into a Rhinos conversation.
Yeah, I think it's more that Coffey. She started Q3, I think, on the bench. It wasn't a reaction, so that's what I couldn't. That's what I didn't get. Like, in terms of that team's just won your first half. Why don't you just stick it out and change if things need changing rather than start the quarter in a change? That was the bit that kind of confused me. So I would like to see off the bench, those back office decisions being made a bit better as well, or at least explained, or just some logic from the outside in. But difficult when you're not there being able to ask them the question of like, can you explain these substitutions to us, please? But
when we take over
that's a whole other conversation.
When we take over the world, Chloe, and become full-time netball content creators, we'll be here, there, and everywhere, all over the country, grilling people as soon as they come off the court. Just one game to go in terms of previews. That's on Sunday. It's at the OVO Arena at Wembley. Mavericks in 6th against Pulse in 3rd. And a must-win game for both teams, really. Pulse, if they want to kind of push themselves back into that equation for the top 2 places and the home advantage that will come with it. Mavericks, as we've mentioned a few times now, they're really at the point of no return. 9 points to play for, and 9 points behind Forest. They could even go into this game if Forest have won or nicked a bonus point, knowing that their top four dreams are over. So in that regard, pretty tough. They do have Panthers and Dragons as their last two games. So we'll feel if they can get something out of this. There is still a chance, given what Forest have left to play. Pulse obviously looking to bounce back after, what by Sam's own admission was not them. And they finish against Dragons at home at the Copper Box next week. And then it's Forest away. One thing that I think is interesting here before we get into the game, the OVO Arena will be the 9th different venue that Mavericks have played over the last 9 weeks. And if you go back a bit further, 10 different venues in the last 11 weeks. And the only place they've played twice in that time is the Motorpoint Arena, bizarrely enough. I just wonder if that's something that it just doesn't help in some ways. We talk about the great home advantage that Thunder have. We talk about the Copper Box being a real cauldron, David Wallace Arena, likewise, the Motorpoint, obviously, as the go-to venue. I just wonder if, and I know Mavs are there's a bigger picture there, but I just wonder if that's something that might impact them slightly. Of course, they'll be up for this game at the OVO Arena. It's a great place to play. But there doesn't seem to be somewhere they can build a fortress. I don't know, just curious to me.
Is that overstated?
Maybe.
I don't think it's overstated. No, it's just yeah, I suppose more as a franchise.
Yes.
What does that do for you? One thing that has come out is that of the work that London Mavericks are doing following their rebrand is their digital, their online clicks, views, and it's off the chart. They're the third most viewed women's sports team in the UK after 2 football clubs. So that whatever they're doing online is really working. It feels like a bit of a modern situation where you don't really have a grounds, but even the clubs that have places like battlegrounds, but I think Nottingham Forest is a bit of an exception because of the football club money. But they're the older teams, the teams that have had an identity for a really long time. But as for the players on a game day, I don't really know whether it bothers them. It depends. I think it's a question of their culture as a group and whether they feel as a group that they're home rather than that they have a home. I think they want to get out and around, don't they? They want to meet their fans and want to grow their brand. And I think maybe in this modern day, it isn't around a home ground so much. It could be that they're better online being visible that way rather than in the same place.
Maybe the
every
Southern
time.
Mavericks, right? That's not a criticism in any way.
No, yeah, exactly.
It's a curiosity of kind of what they're doing. That's my point.
And also where the league is, because we have congestion in we have hence our love of the Motorpoint. It's Loughborough Lightning have been using it like their arena as well, which is why I think it's so ubiquitous. But it's I think it's a really interesting one. But I think I don't know if it bothers them.
No, London Derby. It's a game they've got to win. It's at a fantastic
in central London.
It's a fantastic arena. This, I don't think it impacts it. I just maybe think there's maybe a bigger question that we can get stuck into in the off season there, as far as a home is concerned. And obviously, we've said a million times that maybe the NFL is bigger than just one team at any given time, right? There's a bigger project going on. As far as the game's concerned, obviously the first game between the two teams this year, which Pulse won, in the end pretty comfortably, but that was after a very strong first quarter. There will be bits from that game that Mavs will hopefully take into this. What are you looking forward to most, though?
Yeah, I think the first time these two teams met this season, well, I don't use this word lightly, but it was quite embarrassing.
Yes.
The way that game started. So I don't think they'll have forgotten that. I think they'll want to rectify that. This is a team, really, Mavericks battling up against it. But there's lots to like about what they're putting out. It's the consistency of it. And it's just that, it's getting it to goal. And that's going to be tough against this defense that will be looking to also make a statement after being unpicked. I think it's going to be tough for Mavericks, if I'm being honest. There's going to be a lot of character in this game. I don't deny the amount of character, but I do. I mean, I think Pulse are the favourites, and will be wanting to, if Scholes is back, just to get her back in again. Maybe try some combinations out as well if they got that breathing room, which I think they could build. But yeah, interesting because Ellie Sadler, this is her next gen Ellie Sadler against her team, and she's been building so well. A bit like Marlena Langer. Like, is this a player we could be seeing next season in an NSL team potentially? So, what a great stage to go out and now you're taking on Liv Cheen. You're lining up against them all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Susie Liversidge also had a game to forget against Forest, so she'll be probably out to prove a point in this one.
Yeah, and look, I think as far as Mavericks are concerned, there's obviously a lot to like. Whether we see a little bit more Sophie Egberine, I think is interesting.
Yeah.
She rose to the challenge when Panthers called on her earlier this season. She played for Mavs last year, if I remember correctly. Stepped up from their next
24.
team, 24 actually. Sorry, yeah. And I thought she came on to really good effect on the weekend. Ellie Sadler has risen to all of her challenges so far. Should have been up against Liv Cheen at training. That's one thing that Pulse do really, really well. Like the next gen team and the senior team train alongside each other and test each other out. So not that she's shown any signs of being intimidated in the Super League, but certainly like a teammate is not going to do that for her. But I think we'll see a reaction from Pulse, and I think that's what they'll demand of each other. I think that's what champions demand of themselves, right? Like I think they'd be disappointed if they go out and there isn't a reaction to what went out on court last time. And to your point about combinations, do we see a few different things? Do we see maybe a little bit more game time from Tyler Raw because that might be needed? We've seen Kelly and Maseko work really well together. We know that Kelly and Sheen has probably been the most trusted pairing. Maybe we see a bit more Maseko and Sheen, which we haven't quite seen a huge amount of at different times this season. So I think without kind of glossing over the fact that it's a must-win game, first of all, it's kind of what are the two teams aiming to get out of this? And I think ultimately they'll both want to win because it's a big occasion as well.
Pulse want the points for the top 3 race as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
And Mavericks have to get the points. Like otherwise there's nothing doing. So yeah, I think in that regard, it's a good way to bring the curtain down on the weekend. Another must-win game. Chloe, a little bit of fantasy chat. We did solidly this weekend, didn't we? We didn't kick on after a monumental week 10. Week 11 was a bit more sedate, but we are in the top 50, onwards and upwards for the last 3 rounds.
Yep. Top of the podcast, Paul.
Top of the podcast. That's most important.
Don't ask me what I know I can see on your face. Yeah, I can see it.
I will ask you to bring Ryan on for the if he finishes above us at the end of the season. If he wins it, even more so. We need to ask our friends if there's a prize.
Gosh, I could not handle it. Could not be. He's on that more than I think he started to tell people. He goes around now telling people that we know that he's like top 3 in the UK Netball Fantasy League. So, yeah, that comes up way too often in conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So obviously, I have to chin that.
I probably don't help you in that regard. My apologies. Okay, before we wrap up, some what's the proper term? Teasers. We've got some unlocked guests. We've got an international flavour to that, and on two counts, an international player who used to be in the Super League and an international player who is currently in the Super League, and high-level talks going on to secure one of the stars of the Super League season so far. How's that for a teaser?
I like it.
Very good.
I think we need to go now, though.
So with that in mind, we'll catch you next time and enjoy netball.